bid reached $2 million. The room applauded, not loudly, not with any real feeling, just enough. Just the precise, measured amount that old money requires of people who have learned to perform wealth instead of feel it. Crystal glasses touched softly at the rim. Expensive watches caught the chandelier light and returned it. And the auctioneer smiled the way people smile in rooms where even joy becomes a signal. Nobody in that room understood what had just happened. Not the collectors adjusting their paddles. Not the security personnel standing at every door like very expensive furniture. Not even me. Because beneath that elegant performance of civility, something had already been set in motion. Something quiet. Something surgical. Something designed, piece by piece, long before any of us walked through those doors. Not a robbery. Not a murder. Not fraud in any form a prosecutor could hold up cleanly in a courtroom. No. This was something older than law. Something that only works because it requires love to operate, a betrayal. And the man responsible had been sitting beside me all evening, watching the auction, smiling at the right moments, asking whether I wanted another drink. My name is Elias Thorne, founder of Black Vein Security. At the time of this story, my company was worth just over $2 billion. I built my entire life around one rule, simple, absolute, non-negotiable, trust no one. The irony of what happened next is something I have never fully recovered from, because that rule failed me, and the man who made it fail was the only person on earth I had ever truly called a friend. By the end of that night, I would lose more than money, more than the company. I would lose certainty, and for the first time in my adult life, I would begin to understand the difference between protecting yourself and imprisoning yourself. Before this story continues, if you love psychological thrillers, stories about power, betrayal, and the dangerous price of trust, you are in exactly the right place. Subscribe to the Unspoken chapter. Every story on this channel is built to make you question what you think you already understand. And while this one unfolds, I want you to pay very close attention to Marcus. Not just to what he does, to why he does it. Because the first time I told this story, I was certain Marcus was the villain. The second time I understood it, I realized the villain might have been me. Ask yourself one question while you listen. What is the one thing you would never betray someone for, no matter how much was on the table? Think about it. Then come with me, back to Manhattan. There is a particular kind of silence that only exists around extremely expensive things. You have felt something close to it, perhaps. In the corridor of a luxury hotel at 2 in the morning. In a private hospital waiting room where no one dares speak first. In a courtroom the moment the jury returns. But the silence inside Manhattan's most exclusive auction rooms is different. This silence is not peace. It is not comfort. It is the specific, pressurized quiet of people who are trying very hard not to show each other what they want. A single nod in that room could move $10 million. A whisper could dismantle a reputation built across 2 decades. A raised paddle could shift the center of gravity of an entire industry. And tonight, at exactly 9:47 in the evening, on the 43rd floor of a building most New Yorkers had passed 100 times without noticing, that silence became a mask. Lot 47 sat at the center of the room. It did not need to announce itself. It simply existed, the way truly significant things always do, with the quiet assurance that the room already knew. Behind museum-grade glass, on black velvet, under lighting carefully designed to make it feel like it was being kept alive, rather than displayed. An unpublished manuscript, written by Adrian Vale. If that name means nothing to you, understand this. Adrian Vale was not simply a writer. He was the kind of mind that arrives once in a generation, if a generation is fortunate. A philosopher of systems. A man whose published work had shaped artificial intelligence ethics, geopolitical policy, and the architecture of modern cybersecurity theory. Governments quoted him in classified briefings. Universities argued over him in lecture halls for decades after his disappearance. And 22 years ago, he simply walked away from public life. No statement, no farewell, no final published word, just silence. The manuscript behind that glass, cataloged as Vale Manuscript, unpublished, circa 2001, was believed by most serious scholars to have been destroyed. Others believed it had never existed at all, but here it was, real, authenticated, about to be sold. I had been searching for it for 6 years. Not as a collector, not out of any literary obsession, but because 18 months before this night, I had received an anonymous message, a single sentence. This manuscript contains information that will fundamentally change your understanding of what Black Vein Security was built to become. I did not know who sent it, but I understood what it meant. Someone inside my world, someone who understood what Black Vein was, had decided I needed to know something. What I did not understand yet was that the manuscript was never the trap. I was. Before I tell you what happened at the auction, you need to understand Marcus Hale, not just who he was, what he was to me. Because nothing that follows makes any sense unless you understand what we were to each other before the night everything ended. Marcus and I met during our second year at MIT. Two scholarship students deposited into a world populated almost entirely by people whose success had been arranged before they were old enough to want it. We didn't belong there socially, but we were both too stubborn and too hungry to let that stop us. I was a systems person. Encryption, security architecture, pattern recognition. Machines made sense to me in a way that people never quite did. I understood code the way some people understand music, instinctively, structurally, in patterns too complex to fully explain. Marcus was my opposite. He understood people the way I understood machines. He could walk into a room of complete strangers and within 20 minutes identify who held the real power, who was performing confidence they didn't feel, who needed to feel important, and who was terrified of being found out. He was the most socially intelligent person I have ever met. Together, we became something neither of us could have been alone. He gave my precision a human face. I gave his instincts a structure they could operate inside. 3 years after graduation, we found Black Vein Security. One office, Cambridge secondhand equipment, a shared phone line. No investors who believed in us enough to stay. We nearly didn't survive the first year. I want to tell you about one specific night, because it is the night I have returned to most in the years since everything fell apart. A major contract had collapsed. A key employee had quit without warning. Our primary investor had withdrawn funding, citing what he called strategic realignment, which is the language wealthy people use when they find somewhere better to put their money. Without apology and without notice, we were 3 weeks from missing payroll, 3 weeks from losing the company, 3 weeks from becoming the people who almost built something. I remember sitting in that office at 2 in the morning, the fluorescent light overhead flickering slightly. The spreadsheet open on my screen. No good column, no good row, no combination of numbers pointing toward anything except the end. The specific silence of a man watching something he built prepare to dissolve. Marcus came in. He didn't say anything for a long time. He made coffee, badly, the way he always made it, and set a cup in front of me. Sat down across the desk, and after maybe 10 minutes of quiet, he slid a single piece of paper toward me. A bank transfer confirmation. He had liquidated his apartment, sold his car, cleared everything he owned that had any market value, transferred it all into the company account. Enough to cover payroll, enough to buy us 2 more months. I told him he was insane. He smiled. Not the performance of a smile, the real kind. The kind that doesn't need anything from you in return. And he said you would have done the same. He was right. I would have. And that is the detail that matters most. Because betrayal doesn't work between strangers. It requires exactly that kind of history. It requires exactly that much trust. Which is why what I found years later, in a server room beneath my own house, did not simply hurt. It restructured every memory I thought I owned. The bidding for Lot 47 opened at $600,000. In that room, that was the equivalent of clearing your throat. It crossed 1 million in under 4 minutes. By 1.2 million, 3 bidders remained. By 1.5, 2. Then, from a bidder operating through a legal proxy on a remote connection, 1.8 million. The room shifted, not dramatically, not visibly to most people. But I had spent enough time in rooms like this to read the specific body language of people who have decided they are not leaving empty-handed. Someone wanted this manuscript badly enough to fight. I touched my earpiece. Sarah. Confirm our authorization sealing. Her voice came back immediately. Calm, professional. 2.4 million. Cleared and ready. I signaled my proxy. 2 million even. The auctioneer smiled. $2 million. Do I hear 2.1? And that is when Sarah's voice changed, not the words. The texture underneath the words. Elias, something is wrong. I kept my face completely still. Clarify. Our acquisition accounts have been locked. The authorization is not processing. Run the secondary, also blocked, that is not possible. Run the full diagnostic, the longest pause. The kind of pause that means someone is looking at something they do not know how to describe. Elias. Her voice dropped. The lockout was triggered using your biometric authorization. Fingerprint, voice signature, both verified. The auction room continued around me. Numbers climbing. Voices murmuring. Someone near the back raising a paddle. I heard none of it. My phone has not left my pocket, I said. I know. Then explain to me how my biometrics were used. The authorization signal came from your home server, not the corporate network, not the government infrastructure, my home server, the private system I had always considered the most untouchable thing I owned. Then Sarah said one more thing, one sentence, that dropped the temperature in my chest to something colder than fear. The signal was routed through the sub-basement terminal. The sub-basement terminal. I had installed that access point 5 years earlier, documented it nowhere, assigned it no network address, mentioned it to no one, almost no one. 2 people alive knew that terminal existed, me and Marcus. I looked across the room. Marcus was watching the auction board. His expression exactly what it always was, easy, warm, unhurried. The face of a man who has never in his life had anything to hide. Lock the event, I said quietly into the earpiece. Contact no one, I am leaving now. I stood, straightened my jacket. Marcus turned and touched my arm. Everything all right? I looked at him. Fine, I said. Small administrative issue, I'll be back. He nodded, turned back toward the floor, and I walked out of that room for the last time in my life. Manhattan in October rain has a particular quality of indifference. The city does not notice you. The rain does not care what you know. The lights continue their slow, geometric reflection across wet pavement, regardless of what is happening to the person walking through them. I stood on the sidewalk for 43 seconds, felt the cold land on my face, breathed it in deliberately. Then I flagged a cab, not because I couldn't drive, because I needed my hands free. And I needed to think, without any part of my body performing normality for anyone watching. I did not call Marcus. I did not call legal. I did not call building security, and I did not panic. Panic is the most expensive mistake a person can make inside a crisis. Panic broadcasts your position. Panic reveals your timeline. Panic is intelligence delivered directly to the person working against you, free of charge, wrapped in fear, with your name on it. Instead, I did what I have always done when a system behaves in a way I cannot explain. I traced it backward, methodically, exhaustively, without assumptions, without the comfort of a preferred explanation. The lockout had been scheduled 11 minutes before Lot 47 reached the auction floor. 11 minutes, which meant this was not reactive. It was not triggered by anything I did that evening. It was timed. Someone had studied the auction program, identified the precise moment Lot 47 would hit the block, pre-scheduled the lockout to execute at the exact second I would be publicly seated, publicly visible, and unable to respond without drawing the attention of the entire room. This was not improvisation. This was architecture. 3 weeks earlier, Marcus had asked me a casual question, the kind a person asks when they already know the answer and only need to verify one last detail. He asked whether I had updated the biometric rotation schedule on my home server. I told him I had delayed it by a month. At the time, it sounded like 2 founders talking about system maintenance. Now I understood what he had actually been asking. He needed to know which version of my biometric identity was currently active, which identity layer needed to be cloned, and I had told him. He made one mistake, though. He understood my systems. He understood my protocols. He understood my architecture. But he underestimated one thing. He assumed that betrayal would destabilize me. It didn't. It made me precise, more precise than I had been in years. Because for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't protecting a system. I was hunting someone who knew exactly how I hunted. And that is an entirely different kind of dangerous. My house was never truly a home. It was a fortress that had learned to look like one. Beneath the polished architecture, the library walls, the high ceilings, The kitchen that had appeared in 3 design publications and gave absolutely no warmth was infrastructure that most government facilities would immediately recognize. Reinforced walls beneath the plaster, concealed surveillance with 0 dead zones, biometric entry systems fitted with anti-spoofing hardware at every threshold, a climate-controlled sub-basement vault with independent power, and beneath all of it, the server room, the operational core of Black Vein Security. Marcus had helped design this building. He had consulted on the security architecture, walked the finished installation, offered feedback that only someone who genuinely understood the work could give. He knew this building, but he did not know everything about it. Because behind a portrait in the upstairs hallway, a painting of my father, a man who built things with his hands and trusted them more than people, there was a mechanical override panel, no software connection, no wireless signal, no network address, no digital footprint of any kind. Pure physical control, 3 switches, power, ventilation, magnetic lock. I had installed it because of a principle I had carried since the beginning of my career. Every digital system can eventually be compromised. Hardware fails, software can be rewritten, and apparently, biometrics can be cloned. But a physical mechanism requires physical presence, and physical presence always leaves evidence. I entered through the east service entrance. No lights. The house was completely dark, completely still. The particular stillness of a space that doesn't know you're coming. I moved through it the way you move through a place you built yourself, knowing not just where things are, but why they are where they are. Second floor. The portrait of my father. My hand found the edge of the frame. I heard him before I reached the glass. And the first thing I heard was not urgency. Not the sound of some working against a deadline with their conscience pressing down on every second. Laughter low, private, satisfied. The laughter of a man who believes the hardest part is already finished. I stayed in the corridor, watched through the reinforced glass for close to a minute. The server room ran at its normal operating temperature, which is cold in the way only rooms full of working machines are cold. A dry, recycled electric cold, carrying the faint metallic smell of systems processing at full capacity. The equipment hum was constant, a low, layered frequency, the sound of several thousand components doing exactly what they were designed to do. Marcus moved between the terminals with the comfortable familiarity of someone who has worked in a space so many times that the space belongs to them now. He knew where everything was. Of course he did. On the central transfer station, 3 monitors tracked the upload. Terabytes, still transferring. I could read enough of the file headers from where I stood. Government infrastructure contracts, defense algorithm documentation, executive communication records spanning 11 years, surveillance architecture blueprints representing a decade of classified relationships with foreign governments. And then, the encryption keys, the master keys, the architecture that made every sensitive Black Vein system operable. If those files left this building, Black Vein did not simply lose data. Black Vein ceased to exist as a trusted entity. I reached behind my father's portrait, found the panel, 3 switches. I did not hesitate. 1, 2, 3. The server room died instantly. Not with the gradual wind down of a normal shutdown, but completely, immediately, as if the room had simply been removed from the world. The upload bars froze. Emergency lighting flooded the space in deep arterial red, and the magnetic lock engaged with the specific, irreversible sound of a mechanism built not to be undone. A heavy, metallic, absolute clang. Marcus spun. His eyes found the glass, found me. Neither of us moved. For a long moment, the only things in the world were red light and silence, and 2 men who had built an empire together, standing on opposite sides of a wall. Then his expression did something I will carry with me for the rest of my life. It didn't collapse. It didn't become fear or calculation, or the specific flatness of someone assembling a defense in real time. I expected Marcus to fight, to negotiate, to perform innocence, to offer me some version of events I could examine for the lie. Instead, he went quiet. The way I go quiet when I am working through something I cannot yet name. He paced once across the room, looked at the frozen transfer bars on the monitors, looked at the magnetic lock, then turned and faced the glass. He reached down to the console, picked up one of the encrypted drives, held it toward the glass, The way a lawyer holds evidence before a jury, not as a threat, not as a bargain, as a fact. And then he mouthed 3 words: "You forgot Emily." The cold did not arrive gradually, it arrived all at once, like a door opening onto winter in a room that had no door before. "Emily, my former wife, I want to stop here and tell you something I have never fully told anyone. Not about the investigation, not about Blackvein, about the last real conversation Emily and I ever had. We were in the kitchen, late, a Tuesday night, I think, not arguing, past arguing. In that specific, terrible quiet that arrives when 2 people have run out of new ways to explain the same thing to each other. She put her coffee cup down, looked at me, and she said, "Do you know what it feels like, living with you?" I didn't answer. I didn't know how. She said, "It feels like living inside a surveillance system, designed by someone who has never once been watched themselves." She picked up her bag, and at the door she said one last thing, quietly, without anger, almost gently. "You built something that can monitor everything, Elias. Everything, except what is actually wrong." Then she left. And I filed that memory, the way I filed most things that made me uncomfortable, as a perspective I respected but ultimately attributed to someone who didn't fully understand the work. Now, standing in the red-lit corridor of my own house, watching Marcus hold that drive with the complete calm of a man who has already accepted every consequence, I understood what I had actually been watching for 2 years, the early architecture of a plan, and I had never seen it, because it was made of people, and I had never learned to read people the way I read systems. When the authorities arrived, it was Marcus who called them, from inside the locked server room, on a phone he had carried in specifically for that purpose, a clean device, no connection to any network I monitored. He had not been trying to escape. He had been waiting for them. When the lead investigator entered, Marcus handed over 3 encrypted drives and a document running to 47 pages. A legal brief, pre-prepared, fully evidenced. Then he looked directly at me through the glass and said, "This was never about stealing from you. It was about exposing what you built." I pulled the document from the investigator's hands, and I began to read. I want you to understand what reading those pages felt like. Imagine you are an architect. You have spent 15 years building the most sophisticated, most trusted, most admired structure in your field, and someone hands you a blueprint that shows you exactly what has been growing inside the walls the entire time. Not your work, not your design, but real, present, documented. Mass behavioral surveillance contracts sold to 3 foreign governments under classified designations I had never authorized. Data harvesting agreements that violated our founding client commitments and in 2 cases violated international law. A political manipulation infrastructure constructed using Blackvein algorithms deployed during 2 separate national elections in 2 separate countries. I kept reading, page after page, and the deeper I went, the more the weight of what I held shifted from evidence against Marcus to evidence about me. Because Marcus had not spent 2 years trying to steal Blackvein. He had spent 2 years building the case that would expose what Blackvein had secretly become. Without my knowledge, beneath layers of executive operation, I had either failed to see or chosen not to look at clearly enough. And the manuscript, Lot 47, the thing I had been hunting for 6 years. Marcus had arranged for it to be at that auction, not to deny me access to it. To make certain that when investigators arrived, with cameras, with documentation, with a formal public record of the evening, I would be seen on the other side of the room, publicly separated from the seizure, publicly uninvolved, because the manuscript contained Adrian Vale's private correspondence with 2 of the executives now under federal investigation. And Marcus needed me nowhere near it when authorities took it into custody. He had not been building a trap. He had been building a firewall around me. While I was in my own house, preparing to seal him inside a cage, I looked up from the document. Marcus was still watching me through the glass, and the expression on his face was not triumph, not vindication, not the satisfaction of being right. It was the expression of a man who understood exactly how much this was going to cost both of us, and had done it anyway. 3 days after that night, Lot 47 arrived at my house, released by formal legal order After investigators confirmed I had no direct knowledge of the operations it documented, I set it on my desk and sat with it for a long time before I opened it. The room was dark except for the desk lamp, the city audible somewhere below, the specific silence of a space built to keep the world outside. I thought about Emily standing in the kitchen with her bag, about Marcus at 2 in the morning sliding a bank transfer across a worn desk, about red emergency light and an expression that looked like relief. Then I opened the cover. Inside, on a small card in Marcus's handwriting, "If you are reading this, you still do not completely understand, but eventually you will. And when you do, you will need to decide what kind of man you want to become with the understanding." I turned the first page. Adrian Vale had not written about technology. He had written about power, about how systems built for protection eventually become systems built for control, about how certainty, absolute architectural certainty, is not strength. It is a prison with very good lighting. He wrote about a particular kind of person, not a criminal, not a monster, a builder, someone who constructs systems of such sophistication, such comprehensive reach, such designed reliability, that they eventually lose the ability to imagine anything existing outside the systems they designed. Someone who trusts the architecture more than the people inside it. Someone who builds walls and then mistakes the view from inside those walls for the whole world. I read it twice. I did not need to read it a third time. People say betrayal destroys trust, but that is not quite right, not quite honest enough. Betrayal is more precise than that. What betrayal actually does, when you are willing to sit inside the discomfort long enough to let it speak, is reveal where trust never genuinely existed. Not gone, not damaged, never there. It shows you the architecture you built and asks you one question directly. Was this designed to connect, or was this designed to control? Marcus told me something years ago. Back when we were young enough to say important things simply, he said, "The most dangerous prisons in the world are the ones people build for themselves." I laughed. I thought he meant fear, insecurity, the mental habits that keep people small. He wasn't talking about any of that. He was watching me build Black Vein, watching me design a company around the principle that nothing could be trusted, nothing could go unwatched, nothing could be allowed to operate outside the architecture of my control. And somewhere inside those years, while I was building the walls higher, the monitoring more comprehensive, the systems more complete, something was growing in the space I wasn't watching, because I had designed a system that showed me exactly what I expected to see, and I had never once built any mechanism for watching myself. Marcus is still facing federal charges. He knew they were coming. He walked into my server room that night carrying legal documentation, a clean phone with investigators waiting, and 2 years of carefully compiled evidence organized into 47 pages. He came prepared to be arrested. He came prepared to lose. He came prepared to be the person I called a traitor for long enough that the truth could be heard by people with the authority to act on it. Because he had decided, somewhere in those 2 years we spent in proximity without honesty, that exposing what Black Vein had become mattered more than his freedom, more than our friendship, more perhaps than being understood by the one person whose understanding he had been trying to earn since a cramped office in Cambridge and a badly made cup of coffee and a bank transfer confirmation slid across a desk at 2 in the morning. I sit now with the manuscript, the auction, the server room, the red light, 3 words mouthed through reinforced glass, and I think about silence, about how I spent 20 years building rooms where the silence meant something, meant power, control, safety, and how the silence I sit in now means something entirely different. It means I am alone, not because Marcus betrayed me, but because I built a world where the only person willing to tell me the truth had to break into my own house to do it. Some betrayals destroy people, others reveal them, and sometimes the people we are fastest to call traitors are simply the only ones willing to stand in the wreckage of what we built and tell us what we actually made. Marcus understood that long before I was capable of it. This was never the story of a stolen empire. It was the story of a man who built walls so high he could no longer see what was living inside them. And the most dangerous prison of all is the one where the door was never locked from the outside. Before you go, I want to ask you something, and I want you to sit with it honestly. If the person closest to you discovered you had built something harmful, not with full awareness, not deliberately, but harmful all the same, would you want them to protect you, or would you want them to expose the truth? And does your answer change if you were the one who built the harm without knowing it? That is the question Marcus carried for 2 years. That is the question I will carry for the rest of mine. Leave your answer in the comments. Not just what you would choose, but why. And if tonight's story made you think, not just feel, but genuinely think, then the Unspoken chapter is exactly where you belong. Subscribe if you haven't. Share this with someone who has ever trusted the wrong person, or the right one. There is another chapter already waiting for you. I will give you the same warning I always do. You are not ready for it.